Perfect. Well, welcome and thank you for joining us today in Subnet Summer. It's the first time having you in here, but I've been following your journey since you joined the ecosystem, particularly as I'm also part of BitStarter and a big fan of the work you're doing. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of today, I would love for you to tell us a bit about your background in Google Ads, and what brought you to Bittensor into building Subnet21 AdTAO.
So, short version, background, finance guy by training, chartered accountant in the UK, so I guess CPA equivalent in the US. Always went to finance to learn how to manage money, so I always wanted my own business. Started a business in 2010 that crashed spectacularly when we had the austerity period at about 2012, and got into Google Ads to try and save the business. That accidentally turned into a multi-seven-figure agency. We were part of Google's top 1% of agencies worldwide and kind of in their inner circle, had direct contracts and all sorts with them. Ultimately, running an agency is exhausting because all the kind of bad news tends to flow up and it involves a lot of people, lots of clients and lots of team members, all of whom have opinions. So sold the agency to a company in Texas in 2021. Basically for two reasons. One was I love building tools. I love building things that scale and software. And on the other hand, I'm not a big fan of dealing with people. And agencies have lots of people and not many tools. And I wanted to build lots of tools with not many people. So we sold that and built a Google Ads SaaS that was a spy tool for Google Ads. Started in 2021, scaled that to seven figures, sold it in 24 to right at the end of 2024. To focus on building new Google Ads SaaS. And really, we kind of solved one problem, but it wasn't the one I was most excited about. And I really wanted to get into building the bits that I really wanted. So that gave me the opportunity to do that. So about a year into that tooling build, bumped into Siam Kid, who I've known for a long time because we share a mastermind together. And we accidentally got sat opposite each other at the table at the Christmas dinner in a long line of like 20 people in a fancy London restaurant. And we were talking about what each other were doing. He obviously has the DSV fund for Bittensor. I had never even heard of the word Bittensor at this point. And he said to me, Rob, what's the one biggest problem that if you could solve it would fundamentally change your business or your market? I went, if we could predict what would happen when you made a change to a Google Ads account in terms of how that account performed, you've just unlocked the keys to the kingdom. That's the thing nobody knows. And he went, that needs to be on Bittensor. And I'm like, what's a Bittensor? Explain this to me. And 6 months later, I found myself running a subnet, which I now know what a subnet is. So it's been a fairly rapid learning curve over the last 6 months.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I guess there was two parts to it. It was building essentially a new business with the knowledge you have, but also understanding Bittensor, the protocol, and everything that comes with it, down to the community and how to engage with everyone on the business you're building. Once you got into it and started building the subnet, did you understand that this is the why I needed to build this subnet?
Yeah, so we always knew. So if you imagine a product goes from 0 to 100 in terms of the range of things that it does, we do lots of things in terms of the way we codify data or handle data that are very different to anybody else in our ecosystem. We'll perhaps touch on that as the course of the conversation. But then there was this gap around the 80% mark of things we need to achieve. And that gap is this prediction. It's what do we do for this? We had certainly not the budgets, the time, or the process to go to academia because those guys are too slow. They want academic outputs out of it. They want to publish papers and do all these things that are very nice. But by the time you've done any of that, my problem's already morphed into the third generation of the problem. I can't wait that long. And so we knew that route wasn't close to us. it's really hard to go and hire machine scientists and predictor people and statisticians if you don't. How do you judge the quality of the output as a non-technical person when you've only got a benchmark of one user or one advisor? So hiring is really difficult. So it naturally fits this place where I can find people who have the skills. They're people I could otherwise never find. I certainly couldn't hire. And even if I could hire, I couldn't afford. So Bittensor gave me access to those people that otherwise don't exist as an accessible resource in my business. So it solves a really real problem that's massively valuable to us and to our users, more importantly.
Yeah, amazing. And I definitely understand the whole dynamic between having, against miners being your freelance workers and the validators that come on and actually prove that the work that's been done is legitimate. And there's many advantages to that, especially when you're building a business based off incentives.
Yeah,
I want to understand, based on today, what's actually live and paying versus what's still being built for AdTAO. Because I know that you came into the ecosystem with already revenue essentially built off the back of a business that you brought in.
Yeah, so I brought into Bittensor an existing tech stack. And essentially there's a couple of layers there that really matter as far as the community is concerned. So layer number one is we have access that we've acquired over a long period of time, legitimately, to thousands of Google Ads accounts as a data source for everything that we do in our tooling and in Bittensor. That's important to mention because, we have over 50,000 accounts in our ecosystem right now. Getting hold of 50,000 Google Ads accounts, legitimate and with appropriate approval, is a damned hard thing to do. So that's thing number one that we brought. We then brought a data structure to codify that into a product that essentially we scan a Google Ads account every week. We map it to a structure. We find all the problems and we can automate the next best actions to take. So we kind of automate running the account, but we're using big data sets. The biggest challenge that we had, so that existed. We've been selling that into customers directly and through our own agencies. We started a new agency, essentially to dog food our own tooling and to prove it. So we win most of our new business at the moment through our agency, where our model is very different to everybody else. So how we do it is we take on a new client with our agency. Most people do that by hiring new team members and scaling staff, and they run at 20% margins, maybe 10% or less in many agencies that I've come across. We win a new client, charge an agency level of fee, which is hundreds of dollars a month, not tens of dollars like a SaaS platform. We press go on the tooling and we carry on. So our margin on the same client delivery is 80% plus. So we have that business coming into it, and that's growing very, very well. And the more we build the tooling, the better that grows. We also have a beta group of about 50 users who are paying for use of the tool as well, that we're going to open up, and we'll probably cover up opening it more publicly in due course. So that's what we brought into this. We're strapping into it the prediction model that sits in the middle.
That's phenomenal. Well, I'm excited for those next steps. And what I want to ask from that, now that it costs way more than what you said traditional SaaS providers would be providing, what's the incentive for them to pay hundreds of dollars? What do they get out of it? What's the difference?
So as far as the client's concerned, they don't even know it exists.
Right.
So the client is outsourcing service delivery. The method by which it is delivered, they don't know or care. All they care about is the result that they get, and their ads performing better under our responsibility than under somebody else's. So they're looking for typically accountability, i.e. a person to talk to, and performance. We provide both of those, but all the traditional historic agency mechanics that would go underneath that, which is an army of people doing busy work and hoping they're making good decisions, we've replaced with AdTAO.
So you've built a Google Ads MCP server. Why does that matter, and who's actually calling it?
So that's the next stage in our journey. Obviously, we've moved into a world which is agentic. And when you move into an agentic world, execution of tasks kind of as a thing collapses to zero, because, you know, everybody can look at a guide and plug some things into Claude and say, hey, Claude, tell me what to do with this account. The problem with doing that is Claude and everything else relies on publicly available data, like case studies that they've scraped and absorbed. So it gives mediocre generic advice. So we know that PPC professionals who would normally be buying us through a SaaS, probably some of them want to buy us through being available as a Claude tool. So we effectively sit as the intelligence layer, the proper data intelligence between them building up a Claude agent and actually using real valuable data that they can execute to a much higher standard than just by dropping CSVs into Claude or go into a standard MCP. So we've done it for that reason. It allows us to reach a huge audience of PPC professionals with a tooling set that we can measurably prove is better than any alternative. And that's the key thing. It's provably, measurably better.
Amazing. Well, I'll need to see this in action. So with all of this in mind, what's the end game, and what will be the ultimate way that AdTAO will essentially make money for itself?
So AdTAO as a product we'll continue growing using it ourselves. That will be $1 million business this year. It's already well on the way to that. So that revenue stream will be $1 million business with high margins. The second revenue stream, as we just talked about, is the actual selling it as a SaaS through MCP servers and other routes. That will scale dramatically. My goal, I have a rather lofty goal for this, and we're about to get philosophical for a second. I apologize, but I get quite on my high horse about this stuff. We know that our tooling, especially if we fast forward into 5 months of miner delivery, and then what miners bring to the party, we know we have data that fundamentally improves accounts and their performance for their advertisers in ways that nobody else can. So if we know that, then my obligation is to communicate that to the outside world such that people realize that if you are not running our tooling, quite frankly, you are being neglectful and irresponsible with the advertiser's money, and that's just neglect. It's negligence as far as I'm concerned. So when the world realizes they are being negligent if they don't use our tool, we've achieved our objective, because there are hundreds of thousands of advertisers out there that we all want running through our tooling.
That's really interesting, and I've never heard from that take before. I guess it's interesting because you'll be the expert to understand whether they are being negligible or not. Is there a way that can be communicated?
Yeah, well, but you've just described so an interesting segue. I got into a thread with somebody on X the other day, and I apologize, I can't remember who it was, and they may even be here, but I can't remember. And they said one of their criteria was they would only invest in subnets where there was an industry benchmark to measure against. And that was one of their 4 criteria. I think those are things like revenue and stuff, and things that we have all day long. And so that's really interesting. We live in an industry that spends $300 billion a year in the Google Ads ecosystem alone. It's a $300 billion market, and yet there is no benchmark of performance whatsoever. Nothing published with any credibility, and the only people prior to ourselves who potentially could publish it and produce a benchmark have absolutely zero incentive to do so, because they profit from inefficiency, and that's Google. So I've often described it as it's a $300 business industry running on folklore and gut and rhetoric. And one of the nice byproducts about what we do is, in building our product and running it, we determine what the benchmark actually is and what it should look like. So it's a side quest for us, but something that very much becomes a reality. And I think that'll become a really important communication piece in the future when we start publishing benchmarks and tools for people to benchmark themselves against. That was fun.
Well, that's a fantastic angle to come across, because I don't know any other subnet in the ecosystem that has had to set the standards for benchmarking essentially their own project or product. So I would love to see a bit of a narrative built around that. And I think that would bring a lot of exciting attention, bringing essentially a benchmark that's never existed. So you've used the phrase before, a $300 billion industry run on folklore. I believe that was in the past post. Now that you've explained a little bit about Google Ads, do you want to speak about further what you mean by that? Is it the fact that there's no benchmarks, and why is it happening now? Why is the focus happening now rather than 5 years ago? Is it due to AI?
Yes. I'm getting some terrible feedback here at the minute. Not sure where it's coming from. So I think I just mentioned a minute ago about the whole folklore issue. Here's the thing. If you were to go onto LinkedIn today or Facebook as an advertiser and ask a question about what a best strategy was for a plumber or whatever it might be, you will find 20 so-called experts will jump in and offer 20 different variations of the answer. And they will vary wildly what the answer should be. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. At least 7 out of you are wrong, because if you've all got different answers, at very best, one of you's right. And that's the kind of level that we see, it starts at source. If you think about it from a big perspective, Google have a massive data set that they black box for obvious commercial reasons. Everybody else lives on tiny slivers of data. And so their sample sizes on which they base their judgments are tiny, tens of accounts, not even hundreds or thousands of tens of thousands. And when that happens, it's just meh. It's meaningless. And so we've taken the view that we have to elevate that and, create the baseline, create the facts, build it off evidence, because there's plenty of it there. It's just that the individuals who are currently providing the leadership don't have access to the evidence. So we're kind of exposing that evidence layer to the world so that people can actually see what good looks like. And in doing that, we kind of raise the bar for everybody. People say to us, and if you think about my community outside of Bittensor is Google Ads professionals. These are people who typically are analytical, introverted, often working remotely, always under pressure, always got too much to do. They fear being fired by their clients at a moment's notice. Even more than that, they fear being yelled at by their clients. And if you put any of them on the spot today and said, why did you make the decisions and the changes that you made to my account? On what basis did you make that decision? They would only ever be able to give you a narrative. They could never give you an objective, benchmarked, data-driven answer. And narratives don't stand up very well to scrutiny. So our tooling gives the data-backed decision history to why a decision was made. And in our case, once our miners are a few months into the job, what we'll be able to say with certainty is that was the decision that was taken and action made in your account was provably the best available action to us given your current account status. There was mathematically not a better choice to make. And that's pretty powerful.
That's very powerful. Out of interest, would you be able to share, I guess, like a Google Ads example of where this has worked, just so we can picture it out?
Yeah. So a great example is when it comes to something called bid strategy. Now, and I apologize for anybody listening who is not into the Google ads. I'm about to go into a bit of nerd stuff, so bear with me. If this isn't unclear, anybody just chime in with any questions or whatever, and I'll try and clarify. So when you set up a campaign in Google Ads, one of the settings that you give it is a bid strategy. And now Google give you, I think, 5 or 6 different types of headline bid strategy with several variants underneath that. So, for example, one bid strategy might be maximize cost per click. Sorry, a maximum cost per click. Don't ever bid for this auction anything more than $10 a click. That's one strategy. Another one might be maximize my conversions being leads or sales. So here's a budget to spend. Within that budget, get me the most number of conversions you can. Another one will maximize my visibility. So maximize the amount of times my ad gets seen. Don't worry about how many sales and leads it makes. I just want to be seen. So you imagine these different strategies. Now, they're all going to give you very different answers in terms of how your campaign performs. So one of the things we've mapped, in fact, it was the first epoch that we ran, was given an account and a particular account goal, what's the best, changing from bid strategy A to bid strategy B, what will be the impact of that? So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. If I change bid strategy, what happens? What's the impact? And the answer is, when you get that right, our benchmarks for most of the changes we're seeing give a 20% performance uplift or thereabouts. I'm rounding slightly for ease, but it's roughly 20%. So if you can improve the performance of your account by 20%, and you're spending $10,000 a month, for example, that's a huge, huge change in your results. That's 20% more sales, 20% more leads for the same amount spent. For some businesses, that just changes everything.
Does that actually equate to 20% more sales? Because isn't it about like viewership and clicks, and then from there it ladders down in terms of
20% more leads. In this particular model, it was 20% more leads.
That's a fantastic statistic, and I think anyone that's in any services or e-commerce would take that offer any day of the week.
Oh, yeah, and we can do that today. And here's the thing: we're at Epoch 4 currently. We've done 4 complete weeks on mainnet, and there are certain parts of the ecosystem where we can confidently deliver 20% uplifts in 48 hours.
Amazing. So if someone wanted to work with you, what would be the steps? What would they have to share with you? What's the process to, I guess, get that data from AdTAO?
Depends what they want to do. So here's the thing. Nobody actually gets the data directly. So what they do, if they're a user on our AdTAO platform, they buy an AdTAO account. And when they buy an AdTAO account, they connect their Google Ads account to it and let it do its thing. It will run for you in the background and go, here's the things to do. And essentially, it will give you a list of approve or not approve actions to take. So, currently it runs about 263 different checks on your account immediately, some of which we've modeled probabilities for, some of which we haven't. And we've got kind of like baseline models for those. But within those 260, all you get as a user is, here's what to do, here's why, approve, not approve, go. So you can do in 3 minutes what a PPC manager couldn't do in a week.
Yeah, it seems like it. So it actually gives me, as the owner of my own business, control over what to click and how to set it up.
Yeah,
correctly.
Yeah. Or alternatively, you just outsource the whole exercise to us. You pay us as an agency, and we deliver an agency quality service. Well, a better than agency quality service. So either way works. So you and it really comes down to responsibility. Do you want to be responsible for running this thing, or do you want somebody else responsible for that performance? And that's really the key difference.
Well, if it was my business, I would not want the responsibility. As long as it worked, then I'd be happy.
Exactly. We tend to find that outside of PPC professionals, nobody does. We tried originally about 6 months ago offering it in that space. And, all you do is you create a support headache and a bunch of just people who don't understand and then forget to use the system, and then it's just not worth it. So if a PPC professional, be it an agency or a freelancer, want it, they can take it self-serve. If a business wants it, then they take it and we take responsibility for running it for them. They pay a different price and it's more expensive, obviously, but we take ownership of the result.
Amazing. Well,
can I just mention something else on that as well? Because I think the audience might find this really interesting. So there is a nice loop built into our product in that obviously every new customer brings data because of the data from their own account. And when they do that, every new customer makes the product better. So every time we win, not only do we win with a revenue and a profit, tooling and the data set deepens and gets bigger. So our 50,000 Google Ads accounts grows. Now, when we open up publicly to PPC professionals next month, when they connect to their Google Ads account, they have a special type of account. It's basically a container for lots of accounts. So every new sale to a PPC professional brings with it hundreds of accounts. So we can make one sale and gain a couple of hundred accounts worth of data. I mean, we had one who joined and brought over 1,000 accounts into our ecosystem from one customer sale. So as we want to grow our data pool, build our moat even bigger, every single sale makes the moat bigger and makes the tooling better and more accurate. It makes the mining data set richer. So everything compounds in a positive way.
With that, do you think there's any way a competitor then would ever be able to catch up with what you're doing?
It'd be really damn hard. It's really, really hard.
I guess if Google came on and built their own subnet.
Well, there you go. And here's the thing. And this is what I said before. The people who could do this are the people who have the least interest. And Google, it's a really weird thing. There's a really weird dynamic there. They make money through inefficiency in ad campaigns. I view them often as they're like the house at the casino table. Imagine a roulette table. They do not care if any individual player wins or any individual player loses. They literally don't care. It's not about an individual result. What they do care is that every seat at the table is full and that everybody's paying the right amount into the pool each round. That's what they care about. And in our industry, it's keeping enough advertisers in each auction and making sure that their auction prices are high enough. That's what their win looks like. And so individual outcomes, they don't care. When we apply our tech, ad spend doesn't go down. Results just go up. So we're actually helping Google in some respects in terms of they keep the spend, the advertisers get the results they want, so they don't cancel advertising. They keep going longer. So there is a direct win for Google by us being around.
It seems to be. Well, that's great. Well, I hope they reach out to you soon.
Well, it's a weird thing. I think people say, "Oh, won't Google shut you down?" What could they shut you down? Possibly. Would they? Well, it's not in their interests to. They would be making their own, I guess, lifetime customer values lower, which would be strange.
In that case, Google wouldn't be a competitor. If anything, they could be seen as a partner. Like you're the feature, the plug and play that improves the entire system for everyone.
Exactly. I mean, one of our goals this year is to get effectively preferred partner status on places like Anthropic, Google, those kind of places where our MCP tooling becomes the default, because without it, the data's lower quality, you can't do the job. So that's absolutely where the direction of travel we're going with that is we want to be the default number one in all those places, including Google's Gemini.
No, I'm sure if you continue the work you're doing, it's going to be picked up and spotted soon enough. I wanted to get a little bit more technical with you for any of the miners that would be watching. But on most subnets, the mine output is the product. Here it isn't. Do Do you want to explain how mining fits into AdTAO?
Yeah. So, by the way, I am not technical as far as this bit is concerned. I do my best. It may be that I get something technically wrong, but it will be directionally accurate, if that makes sense. So, as you say, miners are not a product. We have a product, a software product, and in that product, in a database table somewhere that describes all of the available actions to take in an account, there is a few fields that store the likely impact of a given action. It stores the prediction scores. Most of those scores currently, from the 260 tests we have baseline estimates in there. A few of them now, after each weekly epoch closing gets validated and scored, and the miner outputs get scored with their predictions for that particular type of change, they immediately find their way onto our platform. And so typically by the Tuesday after the epoch closed and was validated on the Monday, those particular change events in our platform now contain the new data. So the miner's code doesn't directly go in, the parameters that come out of it do. And the best way I can describe it in terms of product value, if anyone here has watched Fast and the Furious series, you'll know when they're in their cars and they're changing the gears and doing that. At some point in that thing, they reach down and they kind of unscrew the bottle on the nitrous and they press the button and the car goes. The miner outputs are nitrous. It's a rocket booster on everything else that we do.
That's interesting. So if you didn't have the miners, you would still be able to do essentially what you're doing, just not
the product would still exist. It just wouldn't be as good in an area which is such a high value area that it transforms the value of the overall. It's very much a 1 + 1 = 5 kind of deal.
Yeah, okay. I like that. So then what does the miner earn? What is the nitros? What are they predicting? How are they making it more efficient?
So each week we take a data set of changes that have been made to a basket of Google Ads accounts. Currently, the current process, and we're going to change this because we've seen some ways to improve it, but currently we take data from 1 month ago from a closed basket of Google Ads accounts and a series of changes that were made, along with a load of supporting data about each individual account, obviously all anonymized, all made into nice JSONs. That becomes a scoring mechanism, and they predict 7, 14, and 28-day performance changes based on that basket of things they've got, and they submit those scoring predictions. Then on that, we have a ranking table. And we look for how close their prediction is to reality, because when we validate, we effectively unlock what actually happened to those accounts in that 28-day period. And when we unlock it, we're then now comparing what actually happened versus what the miners predicted would happen, and they get ranked based on how close they were to actual reality. We work on a tiered basis, so our top 5 miners go into our elite tier. Then we have a competitive tier, and then we have a kind of below competitive. Our top 5 get like 40% of the emissions, competitive get, I think, 30, and then it trickles down from there. And then we also layer a baseline in to get a score, you have to beat just a normal baseline level. You can't just submit a 50-50 and get a score for it. So it's beat the baseline, be competitive, your score shares, and it runs on a kind of like a 4-week trend, so that you don't just have somebody who solved one problem really well then sucked at the other 3. Your score as a miner kind of self levels over time.
And these miners, do they need to be proficient in Google Ads before becoming a miner? What's the process for them?
Well, here's the nice thing. If you were to look at our data sets and the JSONs that we provide, yes, it's a Google Ads framework, but essentially it's just a time series prediction model. It just happens to have a Google Ads surface. I've not come across anybody yet who has scored really highly, and we've had some really good scores, who knows anything about Google Ads. It's just a math problem.
I wish I was a miner a few years ago when this landscape was, or even last year when this landscape was less competitive.
Well, it's really interesting. Just on that point, week 1 we had 28 miner submissions. Week 2 we had 32. We just finished week 4. We had over 100.
So it's really ramping up as of recent. Is there a particular reason why it's ramping up?
The first couple of weeks we had issues with validators. So getting validators to run our scoring, I guess this is the downside of being unfamiliar with Bittensor as an ecosystem. You naively assume that when you set the scoring mechanism that people will use it, and then you realize actually you have to coordinate with a bunch of people who you don't know who they are, you don't necessarily know how to reach them, and they don't necessarily respond if you do. So we had kind of 3 weeks of trying to get miners to run our scoring, during which time the single biggest validator on our subnet had enough weight to invalidate everybody else's score. So miners were getting wiped out the first 3 weeks. I took steps to remedy that financially for them as best I could. But nevertheless, it's not a fun experience when you're submitting, you think you've done the work, and you don't get score, or you certainly don't earn from that score. Then in week 4, we had miner spam, when valid miners were getting deregistered by just miners spamming submissions. So it kind of was it was a lot bumpy. It was a very stressful time. I found it very embarrassing. I don't like being in a situation where I can't fix something directly. Normally if I've got a problem, I can solve it, but I'm going, I can't make these people change. I can't even talk to these people. Most of Proof of Talk in Paris was me walking around trying to find validators or people who knew validators to persuade them to run our scoring. That was my mission at Proof of Talk, and I left, and the following week it ran correctly. But that's why I think there's been a ramp up. People now see it's sorted, people are earning from it, so we're in a good place. But I guess
well, then I guess it's perfect time to come on here and share that with everyone. And I'll try to spread the gospel that it's working, it's ramping up. The miners are liking it. I guess it's not bugging out. For someone that's weighing up the alpha right now, what backs the value here that doesn't back a prediction as product subnet?
I think the key thing for us is the demand is it's structural, if you like. The demand for us is anchored in a real business with proven demand, and a measurable job within that demand. So we're not asking people to contribute to a theoretical thing which may have a path to revenue and value in the future. We already have that path proven. It's already growing. And it's already working. So it's getting people on board with that. I mean, like today, understand what we do, because I appreciate it doesn't always fit a standard Bittensor mold, and we're living in an ads system which is a bit different. But once you get that and you realize this materially changes advertising on the Google ecosystem, it's a $300 big ecosystem, and it's already proven with people who are buying into it and delivering revenue. It's pretty easy to see the pathway with that.
What piece of the pie do you think you can capture out of interest?
That's a really good question. And it depends. There's 2 answers to that question, I think. Question number 1 is, if we follow our agency model, which is what I've been talked about earlier on, where we take responsibility for that, for running an account. Agencies traditionally are very unscalable things. Agencies of our type are very scalable things. At the moment, we've limited to the US franchise market, or Northern America anyway, because they give us big, decent chunks of growth at once. That'll be a 7-figure, $1 million business this year. It could be easily a $3 to $5 million business in a couple of years' time. But the kind of like table stakes as far as I'm concerned. The more interesting part is if we reach, if our MCP server and a software platform does well, and we then start reaching hundreds of thousands of accounts, albeit at a much lower price point, then the numbers hit into, multiple millions per month. I mean, my initial is if I could improve 1% of Google's advertising spend by 20%, which we're already doing in many places, that's a $600 million value annually. So if I have a path to 1% of advertising, I've got a 600 million value proposition immediately. Sorry?
That's not bad.
No, not bad at all, is it? That's my plan. I refer back to my earlier comment. It needs to be negligent if you're not using our tooling.
And that's a good narrative to build from, even. So, yeah.
It is. The challenge is not pissing off the people that you want to sell to.
Correct. And I hope you don't do that along the journey. I'm sure that will come with any situation.
I just perhaps wouldn't describe it quite so directly as I have on this conversation here. They're a different audience with a different message.
Correct. Where to from here? And for the miners and holders watching, and the people that are watching the recording after this later on, how committed are you to this engine and not this phase, to that $600 million goal? And
so here's the nice thing for us. We're not solving a physics problem. And, if you look at physics, the laws of physics don't really change very much. Gravity seems to work well today, and has worked pretty well for a few, million years. So if you're a miner solving a gravity problem, that problem doesn't change. Google is rapidly changing its business because it has to, and it's not about to give up on a $300 billion cash cow. And a cash cow, it's still growing. It grew at 15% last year. So despite all the noise around this, so as it continues to change on its journey, we continue to. The mining problems are not a static problem. The mining problems move with it. So there is no level here that says, done, complete, move on. If there was a finish line, we go, okay, we've finished this Bittensor thing, see ya. But that finish line doesn't exist because every time we solve today's problems, tomorrow's are coming. So that we need new prediction models and new ways of handling them all the time. So we're here for the long term with this, because we think that's where the value exists, and we want to keep attracting and retaining really smart miners who grow with us over that period, and alpha supporters who similarly see the direction of travel. As we deepen the product and make that better, there are spin-offs from this product that are standalone value on their own. I won't bore everybody with them today because I'm very conscious we've done enough nerding on the ad platform already, and I don't want to introduce another layer of nerdery into this. But as we get through this track and probably into Q4 of this year, there are standalone spin-offs that benefit directly from this that our alpha holders benefit from. So that'll be fun, I think.
So as long as Google keeps iterating and changing and updating to improve their cash cow, or keep the numbers going up year on year, your miners have more work to do. In short,
we're busy people.
Amazing. I'm quite shocked. I'm pleasantly surprised. I didn't realize that the runway that you had in front of yourself. And I also, I don't know, I'm not too versed in Google, Google Ads agencies, but I do know that, as you said, it's very difficult to scale because you can only go so far with so many employees and managing so many clients. But I believe the bottleneck for them is generally that is it that one-to-one relationship with like someone on one end to the client on the other end, whereas with you it's you're offering a tool that can just keep
so in So in most agencies, and I'm going to generalize here because agencies come in all shapes and sizes. And if you're servicing the advertising account for Booking.com, you probably have a different approach to if you sell in the advertising accounts for the local plumber and dentist. So dynamics vary, but typically in most mid-size agencies, you're running at one technician per 5 to 25 clients. That's how they will be spending their time. And outcomes for that client, and after I sold my agency, by the way, I went into a period of training other agencies on how to run their teams and their technical stuff. I've probably trained several hundred agencies over the years. And the one thing that is common throughout is the standard of delivery and the client's outcome is almost entirely determined by the abilities of the specifically individual assigned to their account. And I look at that as a data person and somebody who lives and breathes and going, let's standardize, let's structure this, let's analyze the data from this level, not here. I look at that, I could cry because it's like that should not be the case. The fact that that is the case in this day and age frustrates the hell out of me. And yet the changes I've seen, even in the last 18 months with AI, are marginal. And so our view is entirely, screw that, fix the process, not the person. And you likely don't need the person at all in the future. The person there is a means of reaching the customer, but that goes away relatively quickly.
Fantastic. Wanted to ask you before we finished, how do you find the experience in Bittensor with the constant changes? In the past week, there's been 2 changes.
I'm conscious that I'm a newcomer in a community that I don't fully understand, and therefore my views should be taken with that in mind, because I am by no means an expert who's entitled to an opinion in any shape or form. What I will say, it's like trying to do it. If you imagine if you were sat on a speedboat where somebody else is driving and they're driving damn fast to go somewhere, the sea's really rocky, and you're in the back of it trying to, paint a masterpiece picture. And meanwhile, you're kind of going side to side and round because the person driving the boat is going, really fast in rough seas. That's how it feels like. And there's no Subnet owner's user guide. There's no one comes in and tells you what to do. It's kind of like, just figure this out, guys, and good luck. I would say it's really hard. As in, I'm sure if you've got a crypto background, it's easier, but when you don't, everything's difficult, everything's confusing, and instability is really difficult to deal with. Just when you think you understand how to live and survive in the ecosystem, the rules of engagement change. So, even this morning, before coming to this call, for those of you who don't know, we're backed by DSV Fund in Subnet21. And I messaged Mark and Siam this morning. I went, guys, have I just missed it? Or do you have anywhere as a community where all your subnets can discuss changes that are coming down the pipe collectively and make sure that we kind of cover each other's backs, understand what the implications are, and we don't miss anything? Because I'm sure we're all sat in our own little huddles trying to figure it out individually. Let's pool the resources. And I assume the response is going to be, Rob, you're an idiot. That's not how it happens around here. People do it already. And within 5 minutes, Mark Creaser responded and went, that's a fantastic idea. Let's do it. So that's what it feels like as a subnet owner. It's difficult and it's confusing. I trust that there are people smarter than me who understand the ecosystem, care for it deeply, and make good decisions. And all I need to know and work with is how they affect me and our investors and our miners to make sure we do the right thing for everybody.
I guess there's Church of Ral. I guess that's a place where it gets a bit more technical and you can dive into the protocol changes themselves. And then we're trying to host spaces on X now to, I guess, bring the conversation together so we can talk about these things. But the way I see it is that we're going in a direction. Either way we're going there. We can go there slowly, which I guess institutions like UMA will appreciate. because it gives them time, or we can actually rip the Band-Aid off as quickly as possible. And it's going to be an uncomfortable journey by doing that, but we're actually going to get to that destination where we were always hoping to get to.
I rarely see situations where time rewards being slow. Be fast, break some stuff. I'm aware I'm on the receiving end of those changes, and I'm one group amongst many. Subnet owners are only one category of audience here. So, they're not just trying to please people like me. They're trying to please, the ecosystem and its aims in itself and other stakeholders. So, as far as I'm concerned, everything I read, whether half the time I don't understand it, the bits I do understand, or Claude helps me understand, they seem smart. So I trust the higher powers to be smart about these things.
Likewise, well, I try and engage with the intelligent higher powers that be, so that I understand as much as I can myself, and play catch up, so I can, I guess, be still part of this ecosystem. Because when I feel like I don't understand, I feel like I'm drifting away from what we are.
Yeah. But I've changed my stance, actually. My first month, 6 weeks live was very much, excuse me. My first month or 6 weeks was, everybody, don't talk to me about all this noisy stuff. We're trying to get the validator solved and sort basic problems out. Leave me alone. Tell me if there's something I need to know about. Whereas now we've got that bit handled, I'm now looking around and going, okay, there seems like there's things going on here I need to pay attention to. And so we've rather moved the approach a little bit, because I think we now have the mental bandwidth to do that, and also feel we have the responsibility to do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also think it's early days, it's probably just too much information to absorb at once while you're trying to build a subnet. And then also understand the ethos to the ecosystem, the direction we're going in, the constant changes, the battles that are happening internally, different points of view. Yeah, I get it. And I'm glad that you're I guess, way more a part of the journey now. You've been around for a while. Things are working. You've got 100 miners, and I guess you have time to be a bit more responsive to yourself to the changes that are happening. Ship and shape yourself in regards to the way that the ecosystem moves and how you structure your subnet from week to week. But yeah, it's an interesting landscape to be a part of, but I can definitely see why it's rewarding, and I can tell that you understand that as well yourself.
Yeah, I don't see how else I would solve the problem that I'm trying to solve here. If we look at there are 4 unique pieces of IP in our tooling. 3 of them I've been able to solve with my team. 1 of them I don't know how we solve. And even if you just try and hire somebody to solve the problem is, we've got 100 miners. Last week, 5 of them were exceptionally good. 95 varied from reasonably good to not even clearing the baseline to score. So if that was a hiring thing, I would. There's no way, unless you get incredibly lucky, you hired one of the top 5 people. You're far more likely to hire somebody in the mid or low tier. And if you do that, look at the opportunity you've missed for your product and your customers. And so that to me is the absolute win out of all of this, is that I would never have found those people who seem to be really smart at this, because that's, hiring's binary, because once you've made a commitment to a person, it's, getting rid's not easy. And without the validator and scoring system, you're not qualified to even judge the work. So the validator scoring system and the access to the talent is hugely valuable.
I completely agree. Well, the talent is you're getting essentially the best of the best, and once people that are even better know what's going on and that they can be incentivized to earn through mining AdTAO, they're just going to come and then outcompete with the ones that already exist. So it only gets better and better.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else you wanted to just share with us before we end this?
No, I think we've covered a lot. I think the key thing to understand for us is 99% of Google Ads spend that I see managed today is managed by people treating it almost like an art problem. They're looking at they look at every picture as being different. And we've taken the time, like the early days of medicine, to go, hang on a minute, there's probably something here called DNA. And if we map it, then whilst we all may look very different and have different length arms and legs and different colours hairs or no hair at all, the DNA that we share that underpins how we all fundamentally behave is the same. And so thankfully we had a vault of sample data, a vault of stuff that we've been able to map a DNA, and having mapped it, being able to predict how it will behave in the future is a really exciting problem to work on, and one that I'm pleased to bring to the industry. I'm disappointed the industry hadn't solved it 10 years ago. It would have been great. But tech didn't exist then to do it. So to be able to work on it now, and I guess my final point always comes back to when advertising money is spent, and in this case, $300 billion a year of it, a lot of that comes out of small business owners' pockets who are making choices that otherwise take food off the table. If that isn't managed with the best resources, the best tooling, and the best chances of getting the right outcome for that client, I don't sleep well with that. And you can't do through that through human resource. Something like AdTAO is the only way I know to, hand on heart, know you've made the right choice for that client. And that's why it matters, because it's those people who are spending, and they're spending in a market where it's not very transparent, it works against them, and they need all the help they can get.
Amazing. You should be the Google Ads service for Bittensor to put us on the map, spread us across the internet.
Well, there we go. We'll do a special deal.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We'll do another one soon to check where you're at.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody joining. Appreciate all your time today.
Pleasure. Take care.
Bye.